co-host of this inquiry and to join with my colleagues on a very important message and ability for action here on behalf of our constituents, Houston and Harrison County. First, I'd like to be very clear. The Texas General Land Office had no authority, and say it again, no authority to make any announcements to any government entity or the public regarding the awarding of flood mitigation dollars from Hurricane Harvey disaster federal fund mitigation appropriations. The agreement that HUD and the state of Texas entered into requires that plans of flood mitigation funding distribution must receive approval by HUD, which the state has not sought to do at this point in a way that allowed the complete knowledge and public comment. Any suggestion that this is true and that this was a fault of the Biden administration is not true. The General Land Office should make available the agreement with the Department of Housing and Urban Development so that everyone can know and understand what the state's obligations are for meeting the agreement it has. 21 trillion gallons of water fell during Hurricane Harvey, and at the midst of that, I was glad to have my colleagues join me in the submission of a $174 billion request for this region. Though it wasn't $174 billion that was ultimately distributed, we did have a major infusion of dollars from the federal government that recognized the devastation that we faced. In addition, let me thank the local governments, those who are present here today, Mayor Turner, Judge Hidalgo, Commissioner Ellis, and others who focused on the need for dealing with our social vulnerable communities, language in the HUD legal terminology. With that in mind, it is shocking that as GLO announced over $1 billion in community development block grant mitigation dollars just recently made available from the Housing and Urban Development, with the real understanding that those who suffer the most damage should receive certainly the most aid. I represent portions of Jacinto City and Humboldt, Texas, and so I'm grateful that our small cities are responded to as well. But we must be very clear that the intent of Congress was to ensure that where the damage was most, that you would have the opportunity to be cured. Shockingly, neither the city of Houston nor Harris County, which includes the city, were awarded any of these CDBG MIT awarded funds, even though both the city and county diligently, with documentation, submitted applications for this funding, and despite the fact that our region suffered almost 50% of all damages attributed to Harvey, one of the costliest and destructive storms in our nation's history. This outcome is unacceptable. When I landed yesterday from Washington, I drove to one of the hardest hit areas of my constituency. I drove off of 59 and Tidwell to the Lake Forest area, right on the backside of one of our bayous. I can assure you that the construction or the damage that happened in 2017 is evident. There is certainly work being done on the bayous, thanks to our local officials, combined with federal funds, but you can still see the remnants of the impact on our communities. That means that we're desperately in need of multifamily and single-family homes. It is again shocking to find out that process did not go forward in this distribution. It is also our understanding, which we'll be submitting a letter on this, that the GLO will seek approval from HUD to allocate $750 million of additional CDBG MIT funds allocated to GLO from HUD directly to Harris County. I would imagine that that should not go forward without the appropriate input of our community leaders, our elected leaders. Finally, let me ask to submit into the record a letter directed to Commissioner Bush on June 30th, 2020. In part, this letter begins, but I am writing to request the Texas General Land Office to begin direct allocation of homeowners assistance, multifamily rental, and economic revitalization program funds to the city of Houston instead of administering them on behalf of the city. That had been an ongoing conflict, and of course we understand that negotiation ultimately resolved. But the outrage at that time was that the city was prepared to handle those dollars, and they were not forthcoming. We have the damage. we have people who are hurting. We have people who die, as well as some of our surrounding areas. But it seems appalling that you can, in this instance, discriminate, deny, and eliminate the federal funds that waiting Texans who live in Harris County and Houston have been desperately in need of. Very grateful for this inquiry. We will look forward to determine whether there are civil rights violations and or issues that may go beyond that. The most important point is people of this community are hurting, they're in need, and we must join with our local elected officials in helping to solve those problems. Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I thank you for your courtesy.
Gentleman yields. The chair.